Economic inequality has been growing in the US. This means the rich are getting richer, while the average working person is struggling harder and harder to get by. This disparity has existed since the start of this country. Someone will always have more money than another, but at what point does this become a problem? It's expected that we see differences in wealth in society, of course, but the disparity we see today is astonishing. The following graph shows how the top 400 richest Americans have the same amount of wealth as half the population of America, 150 million people combined. One of these people is Jeff Bezos.
Jeff Bezos is a man with a lot of money. Let's think of his wealth in another sense. The average American worker earns a salary of $49,764 per year. In order for the average American worker to save up enough wealth to match Jeff Bezos, they would have to work for 4,111,405 years.
In this clip, we see that Jeff Bezos makes so much more money than what the average person makes that with the average salary, a person needs to work 4 million years before they accumulate the amount of wealth Jeff Bezos has accumulated. At the same time, many people are struggling simply to earn enough money for basic necessities like housing. Many people are close to being homeless, and it's a very difficult process to get out of there once they're there. All this to say, there's a huge difference between the rich and everyone else. There are people in society that have managed to consolidate more money than they will ever use and will never see. The very few people like Jeff Bezos are living lavish lives, while many others are struggling to avoid living in or already living in poverty. This amount of disparity is a problem. There's so much money in the economy that can help prevent the poor and middle class from suffering to poverty. But the wealth isn't shared here. Instead, it consolidates toward the top, to the very few rich people. In this graph, you can see how the average worker has consistently brought more and more earnings to companies since the 1950s, but their wages have become stagnant. This ever-growing gap between wages and earnings are taken by these rich business owners. What's interesting is that the stagnation of wages also correlates to rising debt. This is because when wages are still, more people are dependent on loans and credit to buy goods, whose prices have also increased. Also, this is because more people have difficulties paying off loans as they don't make enough to fight against increasing interest. This is why even with a six-figure salary, many people find it difficult just to live. In a normal and healthy economy, we will see a virtuous cycle where consumers earn more money and spend more money so that companies that profit are able to grow and hire more people that earn more money. This cycle is able to stimulate a lot of economic growth, but when consumer spending starts to stagnate and decrease, it will turn into a vicious cycle. This cycle is where consumers spend less money, causing companies to lose more money, so they have to fire more people, which makes more people spend less money. As the wealthy keep stagnating wages, this vicious cycle will keep growing, and it will exacerbate a great economic fall, affecting everyone. This isn't the first time economic inequality has caused major problems. During the Great Depression, the economy crumbled because of stagnant wages, the stock market crash, and the failing of banks. 1. When wages began to stagnate, and wealth started to consolidate into fewer and fewer people, the vicious cycle led to rising unemployment and companies losing money. 2. Optimistic investors lost tons of money in the stock market due to the value of stocks decreasing because of decreased profits. When investors saw this decrease in profits, they panicked and sold all their stocks, which exacerbated the stock decline, causing a market crash. And 3. Since investors were able to invest because they were able to borrow money from banks through margins, when the stock market crashed, banks had lost all their money through these loans. As banks started to close down, people panicked to withdraw their money. This exacerbated the problem of banks closing down too. The people who have kept their money inside these banks had lost it all. The collapse of the economy was a huge problem because many people became helpless and stuck. People lost their jobs that provided for their family, people lost their life savings, people lost their trust in banks and the government, people starved, and people lost their homes. Everyone was suffering. In order to address this economic crisis, President Franklin Roosevelt created a platform called the New Deal. The goal of the New Deal was to make programs to support people in poverty, stimulate the economy, and create new regulations to prevent another crisis. Some of the programs created were the WPA, the SEC, and the Social Securities Act. For recovery, the WPA created millions of jobs working in infrastructure for the unemployed. For reform, the SEC regulated and watched over the stock market so another crash wouldn't happen. And for relief, Social Security gave money to those who lost the ability to work. Understanding what happened in the past is key to understanding what we need to do today about inequality. One possible solution to fix economic inequality is to reform tax laws so that the wealthy start paying more in taxes to support important infrastructure that prevent economic depressions. Even though wealthy people have the money to pay off their fair share in taxes, most pay very little or nothing at all. This video clip shows an example of this happening with Warren Buffett.
This is Warren Buffett, one of the richest people in the world, thanks to the company he runs, Berkshire Hathaway. When Buffett took over the company in 1965, a single share was worth $19. Today, it's worth nearly $500,000. Buffett owns nearly 240,000 of these shares. This is where his wealth is. But as he's been known for pointing out, Warren Buffett still pays a lower tax rate than his secretary.
Buffett manages to pay half the rate his secretary has to pay in taxes, even though he's much more wealthy. This is because the wealthy earn their wealth through their stocks, which gets taxed at about half the rate of a regular person's salary tax. This is called capital gains tax. This tax only applies when selling stocks, meaning the rich can avoid taxes by borrowing money against their stocks at banks. This capital gains system is so abused that the rich still are avoiding paying taxes after their death. The way to stop the rich from being able to avoid paying taxes that pay for important infrastructure is to have more capital gains tax, have tax on wealth at a certain point, and to regulate the taxation so a fair and full amount gets paid. More capital gains tax stimulates more money coming in from rich people who sell their stocks. Wealth tax stimulates more money from rich people who pay little in taxes, and the regulations make sure people are paying their fair share. Another possible solution would be having basic universal income for the people who need it. This would be effective because the additional income supplied by the government will not only help people recover from poverty, but push the economy away from a vicious cycle. Unlike before, when people were dependent on credit and struggled to pay their bills, people could now start investing into their futures with this increased cash flow. This, with a lessened financial burden, will push for a virtuous cycle in our economy.
People were saying that folks would just make bad decisions with money, that we would become a different country by providing the dignity that comes with economic security. And the data that came out 3 weeks ago from the pilot shows that all those things are false.
A lot of people really do want the assistance and really want to use that money to further invest in themselves and invest in their futures.
In this video, we see that similar programs have succeeded in people using the extra cash flow to actually invest in themselves. Now, you might be asking, how is the government going to supply this many people with basic universal income? Well, the answer is simple. It could come from the increased tax money from the rich people I was talking about previously. One of the things we should have learned from the Great Depression is how wealth stagnation from the consolidation of wealth hurts society economically. It pushes people into poverty and it pushes a negative feedback loop in the economy. Though, something we can do differently today is push for regulations that prevent this wealth stagnation and to stimulate economic growth. My hope is that with the elections rolling around soon, maybe we'll get a president who can help lessen this wealth inequality. Thanks for watching.